6 teams to go on my road to predict all 131 teams this college football offseason. We are moving on now to the UTEP Miners, one of the more under-the-radar yet pleasant surprises in 2022. Now, this is a UTEP team that normally you can just sit at the bottom of Conference USA, and I think that's what a lot of people are expecting UTEP to regress back to this season. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. I think UTEP is still going to be a competitive team, still going to be a solid team in Conference USA. Now, there are question marks on this team. Yes, that is true. But UTEP made a bowl game last year. Will they be able to do it again in 2022, or will we have to wait until 2023 and beyond to see the Miners go bowling again? What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate, and welcome to my channel. I'm predicting all 131 teams this college football offseason, which means I'm doing your favorite teams. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when that video gets uploaded and the fans of the UTEP Miners out there, well, you guys are going to know this team a lot more than I do. So if you feel like I missed something, you want to add something, hey, please leave it in the comment section down below. I'd be more than happy to hear what you guys have to say. And in fact, going back earlier, I've probably already done your favorite team. I got playlists on my channel that you can go search through. And hey, maybe find another team that you're curious on in 2022. Let's go ahead and talk about UTEP in 2022. I know I said 2022 a lot in the beginning of the video, but hey, let's talk about it. My 6th ranked team in Conference USA coming into this upcoming season that is just, as of recording this, 15 days away. When we look at UTEP here, well, last season they were 7-6, made a bowl game, and then 4-4 in conference play. And offensively, 391 yards per game with around 25 points per game. But the strength of this group was their defense. They only allowed 24.8 points per game and only allowed 339 yards per game. That, respectively, is the second and third best mark in the conference last year. Second in yards per game, fourth in fewest points per game allowed. So really good stuff out of this defense from last year. Very, very impressive stuff from the UTEP defense. The offense definitely could need some work, definitely could use some things to help bolster that offensive side. And especially when you look at losses here, that's where the concern is on this team, is offensively. Are they going to be able to really be great this upcoming season? Because last year, they were good, but they weren't great. And they're losing a lot off the offensive end. They're not losing a lot of names, per se. Willie Eldridge has gone off the running back room. That's just kind of a depth piece from last year. Only had 123 yards last year, a depth piece there. No, where the concern on this offense comes in is the wide receiver room. So you do lose Jacob Cowing and you do lose Justin Garrett. So Jacob Cowing, Justin Garrett, 2 names right there that were the leading receivers for this team last year. Cowing had 1,354 yards and 7 touchdowns, and Garrett had 685 yards and 4 touchdowns for this team last year. So the concern in this wide receiver room is evident. You lose your top 2 targets from last year, who were definitely your best 2 wide receivers by terms of just pure raw talent. On the defensive side, Josh Ortega's gone off the defensive line, 16 tackles in the sack last year. James Neal gone off the linebacking group. He only had 4 tackles with a sack last year, but hey, still production loss nonetheless. Walter Neal, spelled differently, not related, is going to be gone out of the defensive back group, along with Devon Inyang and Josh Caldwell, a couple top 10 tacklers off this team from a season ago. And Inyang, well, 3 interceptions, 7 passes defended, both of which were some of the leaders on this team. He led the team in interceptions, second on the team in passes defended. So there is good talent leaving this offense. There is good talent leaving this defense. Nate, how do you say that UTEP is going to be able to get back to a bowl game this year? They're losing a lot of their better players. Well, I'll tell you, is because some of their better and I'll say even more underrated players are coming back. That includes the quarterback, and Gavin Hardison had 3,218 yards, 18 touchdowns, 13 interceptions from a season ago. Yes, there are some things that he can clean up, especially cutting back on his interception numbers. But overall, I think Gavin Hardison, there's improvement to be made, but if he has made those improvements, taken those steps, I think he's going to be a really good quarterback for UTEP again in 2022. Would not surprise me to see Gavin Hardison eclipse 3,000 passing yards yet again this upcoming season. And in the running back room, well, you return your top 2 leading rushers from a season ago. Ronald Awatt, who had 843 yards and 6 touchdowns, is coming back, along with Deion Hankins, who had 458 yards and 6 touchdowns a season ago. So you do return your top 2 running backs from a season ago, and they have led your team in rushing over the past 2 seasons. A wide receiver, running back combination type player, is Reynaldo Flores, had 130 rushing yards and 204 receiving yards last year. Was the fourth leading rusher along with the fourth leading receiver on this team. You get him coming back. But in terms of pure wide receivers, well, I think the big question for this wide receiver room is there any guy that's going to play a Jacob Cowing type role? Is there any guy that's going to play Justin Garrett type role? Any guy to play a Jacob Cowing type role is going to be asking a lot, especially at a program like UTEP that gets one of those players every generation. But when you take a look elsewhere, I think there are players that can eclipse Justin Garrett's 685 yards from last year. One of those, and I think the most likely option to do it, is Tyron Smith. Had 33 catches, 570 yards, and 4 touchdowns last year, and did average 17.3 yards per catch. If he's going to be the Jacob Cowing, if there is a Jacob Cowing on this team, I think Tyron Smith is going to be it. I think Tyron Smith is the most capable guy, the most talented guy. He can absolutely do it. Now, there's Walter Don, who was a depth piece last year that figures to play a little bit of a bigger role this year, only 27 yards receiving last year, but he does come back. But one of the bigger pieces on this wide receiver group, I think, is going to be a transfer, I believe, over from Western Iowa. I know it was like a community college Division II type program, but Kelly Akiharai is coming over to this team, and he should be a solid option in the wide receiver room. I probably butchered that name. I apologize. And they're getting their tight end back in Trent Thompson, who had 133 yards and also had 4 touchdowns last year. On the defensive side, Jadarian Taylor comes back. Hey, he led the team with 6.5 sacks a season ago. You also have Keenan Stewart returning for this team. He had 35 tackles last year. And then Praise Amaywool, probably butchered that last name as well, on the defensive line, who had 5.5 sacks, who was second on the team. So you return your top 2 leaders in sacks from last season on the defensive line, and you return 200 total tacklers from last year. Tyrese Knight and Breon Hayward are 2 names coming over in the linebacking group that each had over 100 tackles, each had 3 pass defended, and each had at least 1.5 sacks last year. Those are 2 huge get-backs for UTEP this upcoming season. Justin Prince, Torrey Richardson, some names coming back in the defensive back grouping. And then lots of transfers coming in to this defense. One of the more notable ones is Latrez Shelton, but you also have Maurice Westmoreland on the defensive line, D'Angelo Bellamy in the defensive backs, also guys like Kobe Hilton, Josiah Allen. There is talent coming over from this UTEP team. And if there was a question about the defense, it was probably the defensive secondary. They have 4 transfers coming over to help them out. When you take a look at this UTEP schedule, hey, they are one of the few teams that play in week 0, a home game against, you guessed it, North Texas. That's going to be a very, very interesting game, as North Texas, while they lose DeAndre Torrey, should still be one of the better teams in Conference USA this upcoming season. In terms of non-conference games, you have a road game against Oklahoma. That's going to be a hard one. I don't think UTEP's going to have much luck there. New Mexico State, New Mexico, and Boise State round out the non-conference schedule. Boise State, definitely the hardest out of the 3, but the other 2 are very, very winnable games for this UTEP program. When you look elsewhere, yes, you have that home game against North Texas in week 0, but otherwise you have home games against FAU, Middle Tennessee, and FIU, and then you have games on the road in conference play against Charlotte, Louisiana Tech, Rice, and UTSA. So diving in a little bit deeper into this UTEP schedule. Of course, UTEP and New Mexico State play every year. UTEP won it last year, but New Mexico State may have some improvements this year. I still don't think that's going to be a great football team, and UTEP gets this game at home. UTEP probably going to end up being the favorites there, as in New Mexico State counterparts in New Mexico. The Lobos, I think, are going to be one of the worst teams in the nation this year. I don't think that team has much going for it this upcoming season. I think UTEP going to be pretty comfortable there. But their other 2 non-conference games, Oklahoma, Boise State, those are going to be some hard games to win for UTEP, especially Oklahoma going on the road in week 1. Now, UTEP, I think, has an offense capable of putting up maybe 10 or so points, but Oklahoma should be able to win that game. Boise State, I would think, would be able to beat UTEP, but UTEP getting the game at home, who knows? There may be an upset brewing there in El Paso. When you take a look elsewhere, though, conference play-wise, there are some tricky games on the schedule, but there are a lot of winnable games. Look to the 3 towards the end of the schedule there. Middle Tennessee, Rice, and FIU. I think those are 3 more than winnable games for this UTEP program. Neither of those 3 teams I expect to really do anything special this upcoming season, although all of them have their capabilities to give UTEP a good fight. I think UTEP is the much better team than all 3 of those, and a win I think they will see. Louisiana Tech and Charlotte, you go back-to-back on the road to start off the remainder of your conference slate after that game in week 0, which we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But Charlotte, La Tech are two teams that can push for a spot in a bowl game this upcoming season. I like what Charlotte has. I like what Louisiana Tech has. They're going to be good challenges for this UTEP program. Then you got some trickier games on the schedule as well. The home game against FAU, hey, that's not going to be an easy game. The Owls are going to be pretty good this year. On the road against UTSA, was the best team in Conference USA last year and could end up being the best team in Conference USA yet again in 2022. And then the home game against North Texas, which again could be one of the better teams in this conference. All right, I don't do game-by-game predictions. I do a more percentage-based outlook to help me predict the team's record. So if the game is in red, I just don't see you winning the game. Case in point, Oklahoma. I think they're going to have a tough time winning that game in Norman. Games in orange are games that I still don't think you're going to win. But hey, it is college football and upsets can happen. FAU, that game is leaning on a yellow-orange game for me. UTSA, I think that's just going to be a hard game to win. I'll talk more about why here in a little bit. And then Boise State, I have that game in orange as well. Yellow are 50-50 high upset potential games. Games in yellow-green are games that you should win. But you got to watch out for teams on the other side of the ball, and games in green, I do have you winning. So no games in the darker green. Moving on to the yellow-green type games. Rice, FIU, Middle Tennessee, New Mexico State, and New Mexico. I all have as games in yellow-green. I like UTEP's chances in all of those games. I think they will end up being favored in all of those games. The trickiest one there, probably that home game against Middle Tennessee. I don't really have high hopes for that Blue Raiders program, but there is a lot of potential still sitting there. That defense has some holes to fill, and we'll need to see how aggressive they're going to be this upcoming season. But overall, I mean, UTEP's got a lot of favorable games on the schedule with those 5 that I just mentioned. Now, looking at games that are in red and orange. Oklahoma, in Norman. They're just flat out not going to be able to win that one. I'm sorry, Miner fans, but you're not going to be able to pull off an Oklahoma upset this upcoming season. That's my opinion. When you take a look elsewhere, I mean, Boise State, FAU are 2 games that UTEP gets at home, so maybe they can make a little closer than some people think, but I still think you're going to have a hard time pulling out the W in that one. So when you look at Boise State, when you look at FAU, I think those are 2 teams right there that may very well end up beating UTEP this upcoming season. And UTEP, while I think they can make the games close and competitive, I don't know that they're going to be able to beat either of them. And I really don't think they're going to be able to beat UTSA. Look, that's a UTSA team that people are expecting to take a step back, rightfully so. They are losing some talent from last year, but they return Frank Harris. They return Zachary Franklin. Sincere McCormick is gone, but they're getting Traylon Smith over from Arkansas, which I think is something a lot of people forget. That's still going to be a good UTSA team this upcoming season. Now, all the games in yellow, on the road at Charlotte, on the road at La Tech. UTEP may very well have to win one of those games to get into the postseason on the road. Now, those are going to be 2 teams that are going to present their respective challenges to the Miners, but they are still 2 winnable games for this UTEP program. And then finally, that home game against North Texas as well. That very well may be a game where decides which team is competitive in this conference and which team may be forgotten about and left towards the bottom. But North Texas is still going to be a good football team this upcoming season. When I look at UTEP here, I do see a good team. And people I've seen are going 3-9, 4-8 on this UTEP team. I just don't think that's the case. Yes, Jacob Cowing's gone. Yes, Justin Garrett is gone. Yes, they lose some pretty solid pieces in the defensive back position. But I still think there's good wide receiver talent here, and the defensive backs are getting a lot of transfers. I don't see a reason why this UTEP team doesn't go bowling again. There's lots of favorable, winnable games on the schedule, and I got him sitting here at 6-6. In fact, I could see him as good as 8-4. I do think the schedule is fairly favorable, especially if they can pull off some upsets like the Boise State game, like the FAU game. I do like what UTEP has this year. I expect this team to go bowling yet again in 2022. That's going to do it for my thoughts on the UTEP Miners. Hey, remember to like, comment, subscribe. It helps support the channel. And remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.